Okay, and I think we're live. Welcome everyone to Monday Meets. Very excited today to be here with poet and author Dena Parker Duke, who is the author of the collection we're going to talk about today called In Your Bones, Poems of Radical Forgiveness, and is also a DV survivor, and these poems in part came out of that. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the collection, about Dena's background and writing process, kind of the how we look at art as a healing mechanism and tool for those who are in trauma, and we'll read a few things from the collection. So thank you, Dena, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Really happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. This is kind of an informal conversation, so if anybody has any questions throughout today's presentation, feel free to leave a comment on the Facebook. I've got it on my phone right here, and we'll be happy to get any questions in that we can that come in during. If you have any questions about Dena, her work, or the process, or the Willow, you can get those all in. We will also leave information on who to contact in the middle and end of the program, so that if you have questions later on or you don't feel comfortable asking publicly, you can go ahead and send those in. I'll put those in the comments as well. But let's go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. Now, where are you currently from again? Where you at?
I am here in Boise, Idaho.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Kansas, but kind of grew up in Oregon, but I find myself in Idaho now. So
okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us. Really do appreciate it. Would you tell us kind of just a little bit about your background and how you came into the poetry writing, how you came to write a collection of poems?
Yeah, it kind of surprised me as well. I am a retired elementary school teacher. I taught second grade for most of my career and taught for about 30 years. And I did teach math and science and all those things, but I found that the thing I loved most was teaching writing, and got involved in some writing groups and things, writing on the side as a result of that. But boy, did I learn a lot from second grade poets. You know, how fresh and raw and honest they were. So I enjoyed that throughout my career. And I was always a journal keeper from early on. And I found I played the guitar, so I also wrote songs, and there came a day when I found out that lyrics were poetry. You know, I wasn't really trained as a poet. I just kind of
Okay, I'm sorry, we froze up a little bit on this end. I hope that we didn't lose anything there. But you're back with us now.
okay.
So yeah, sorry about that. So I wanted to go ahead and throw out a quick content warning. As this is, your story, and you are a domestic violence survivor. I just wanted to let everyone know that some of the content involves will involve talking about your the abuse that you survived, and people should be aware of that. But can you tell us a little bit about how these poems came out of that? And I mean, I don't want to obviously. Feel free to let us know as much or as little as you like, but just tell us a little bit about your story and how it sort of moved towards poetry as a way of kind of healing from what happened.
Okay. Yeah, I was raised thinking about how to stay safe every day. And for me, that meant being quiet. So I was kind of that, the good kid who observed a lot and didn't say a whole lot, but didn't miss anything either. And writing was a quiet thing to do, I found. And as I would play music in my bedroom or eventually start writing. Those were all things I could do. As long as my room was clean, I didn't have people coming in looking for things that I might have been writing, which some people might have that issue. But I found that writing not only was quiet, but it could be quite subversive, you know, that I could use it to express myself. And I started doing that at a pretty early age. When I found out that I was going to be retiring in 2019, I started thinking about how I might be spending my retirement. And even before I got started, or before I was fully retired, I started going back to the hundreds of poems that I'd written in my life and realizing, I started kind of stacking them and sorting them and just realizing how many I had based on my childhood, some of them written in my childhood, many of them written about my childhood. So it just kind of grew over time that this was the collection I would write. And it wasn't what I intended to do. It wasn't particularly an easy thing. I think the hardest part was when I was all done and then I was sharing it. I realized kind of what I had done. And it was a whole new thing to be sharing it with people.
Yeah, yeah. Is that how does that sort of how does that resonate with that sharing? You know, is it? It seems like it's definitely something that's a different world from just sitting at home alone when you know being subversive and writing it. Well,
Yeah.
what were the challenges of that?
Yeah. In fact, I remember telling a friend, a good friend, about these poems, and first thing she said was, you know, why don't you just burn them? Because she was worried about me putting them out there. And yet I knew that I didn't want them just to be known by me. I felt like there might be other people who could get something out of what they had to say. So that kind of inspired me to keep going. But I did realize when I started sharing that I really had kind of conflicting goals. That as a poet, I really wanted the poems to be, I wanted to bring you inside my trauma. I wanted you to see what that felt like. I wanted them to be good poems, and I wanted them to be provocative and to hit home. I wanted them to be poignant. And yet, I wasn't really thinking as much about that as about how much joy it was giving me, the creative process. So I was filled with a whole lot of joy as I was sharing it. And a lot of people were excited because, you know, it's a beautiful book, and it even has some art of which I'm not known for. But it turned out really beautifully. And then a lot of times people would start reading it and they wouldn't always get the joy. So one of the things that I really have tried to do as I've shared it is to share how much joy it gave me to get these poems out of me into the world. And I even one of the things that I focused on was even the shape of the poems. And it was like, even the first poem in the book, you might be able to see it has a shape to it. And even though it's about fear, and it doesn't necessarily end in the most uplifting spot, it is diminishing. And so I think there's light in every one of the poems, but maybe the light is just my voice being able to be expressed, or some fear coming out of me into the world so that it doesn't have to be inside anymore. Yeah. So
well, thank you. That's extraordinarily helpful. And just to remind everyone, if anyone has any questions for us, feel free to, on the Facebook feed, put them in the comments, and we will go ahead and take those as they kind of come in throughout. But I want to kind of touch back a little bit on what you were saying just now, Dena, and that your choice of poetry There's also, some people may be drawn to fiction writing. Some people may be drawn to journaling. People may be drawn to memoirs or essays. What was sort of the draw of poetry for you above and beyond those other forms?
Well, one of my favorite poets puts it best. Padre Otuma, who is the host of a beautiful podcast called Poetry Unbound, he talks about how poetry doesn't try to tell the whole story. It just tries to take moments and tell those moments well. And, when you have been traumatized, telling the whole story is pretty overwhelming. And I couldn't, especially when you go through that as a child, you might not even completely understand what the whole story is. And so taking moments is what poetry allowed me to do. And what the book allowed me to do was put them together in what, for me at least, seems like an arc, starting with fear, but it really grows. And we'll talk when I share some of the poems about where the title came from and how, in the beginning, there's a real reflection of fear being, just the kinds of things that seep into your bones when you're traumatized. You may not even be aware of it, but then it moves through that idea in several different ways. And the last poem in the book talks about doing yoga and strengthening my bones as well. So it kind of takes that metaphor as a theme throughout the book.
Great. You talk about the sort of when you were speaking earlier, I was really interested in that sort of the overwhelming emotion as in this part of the process was joy. That even though the poems themselves, as a reader, there are some pretty heavy stuff in here. There's definitely a lot of lighter works as well, and you could feel some of that buoyancy, particularly kind of in the latter sections. But there certainly are some pretty heavy poems. Was the process, how did that unfold? Like, how did you take something from just the germ of an idea or a moment into kind of recognizing it into something like the fear poem, where we see that kind of diminishing sort of feel to it? What was you stated that you don't really have a lot of formal training, so you're working very intuitively on these. How did you kind of focus them and hone them into the pieces that are in the book now?
Well, I think that what I gained from working in some writing groups and being around writers and even being around second grade writers was a sense that, poetry only works if it's real and it's true to something. And so what I would look for in a moment was, what was the point of that moment? Why did that moment stick with me? And then, one of the things that's beautiful about journaling is to just kind of write. Don't think about where it's going or anything else. But
Right.
I would find, as I went through that creative process, that I would be able to see the poem form itself. It might be, covered by lots of other not such good poetry or not great lines, but I could begin to pull things out over time, especially as I started sharing writing with other people and knew more and more what to look for. But it really all revolved around, what is that moment? Every poem should have some kind of heartbeat in it or some kind of heat. And so I would just always look for, what is the point? What's the point of this moment and where am I going with it? That's why a lot of my poetry isn't real long, is because I want to focus on whatever that moment is and have that really pop out in a poignant way. So.
One of the things that I feel is so important in telling, and one of the reasons I think survivor stories are so intensely powerful, is that one of the main focuses of the abuser just to push that isolation, to push that loneliness, to push that feeling of being just emotionally detached from anyone but the abuser. Have you found in kind of sharing these that people have really resonated with some things that you maybe intended, but again we're a different part of your journey, or has it sparked some and engaged some conversations that you maybe didn't anticipate when you started the process?
Yeah, it sure did, much more than I had any idea that it would. And I was telling you earlier that I actually created a whole website around trying to share the book and explain it, because at first, Brene Brown, who has researched shame, she says that shame is something that doesn't like to have words wrapped around it. And I found when I started sharing these poems that, especially if people were a little put off or nervous or anxious about the topic, that a lot of shame came into play, both for them and for me. And over time, it seemed like every time I shared the book again, it eventually turned into kind of a TED Talk, in an attempt to sell what I was trying to do here, which was shine light on something that's hard to shine light on, because what's such a paradox about trauma is that the best way to heal from it is by sharing it and coming out of that isolation. And yet it's the hardest thing to do of all. And so it makes for a real catch-22, you get real stuck if you can't find a way to get some of these things out of you and share them with other people. So yeah, I ended up doing this whole website called A Tiny Light, because I was trying to focus on, one of the things I found throughout my life and throughout my childhood was that, much to my surprise, there was a little light inside of me that nobody could take that away. And I think that message was one I needed to find in all of this. And it was really the big message of the whole thing. So I don't want people to miss that. And it can maybe be hard to miss it if these poems bring up your own sense of shame or feelings and anxiety or whatever it might be, when you were expecting an easier topic, because it is a hard topic, and yet
Yeah.
it's the one thing we need to share more than anything else.
So if say someone who is watching this either live or is watching it on the YouTube broadcast is kind of moved by this and wants to start down a creative road and maybe write through some of their own personal story and crisis. Do you have any sort of did you pick up any tips along the way? How would you recommend somebody kind of start that process? And is there anything to kind of look out for, anything to kind of focus on that was really helpful for you?
Well, one of the things that I definitely feel is, writing is thinking. And, sometimes we don't acknowledge how important our own thoughts are. And I think sometimes when you even just journal or you just do like morning pages, people talk about just writing down anything. It doesn't have to be good, just writing what you're thinking. It can be a way of helping you just stand back and look at your life. And anybody can do it because it doesn't have to lead anywhere. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It can just be for you. Mm-hmm. If it's going to be more than that, then you'll probably know that because it will become more than that. And you'll want that, but it doesn't have to. Many hundreds of millions of people just write just for the pure joy of writing their thoughts down every day. There are a couple of books that helped me a lot, and they're pretty old, so you probably can find them at the library really easily. but one is called Writing Down the Bones. And
yes, I'm familiar with that one.
it's an old book, but they're just 1 page or 2 page little chapters that give you something to write about that day. So if you're stuck and you want a great idea for where to go, because one of the things she said, it's just inspirational. It's inspirational if you're stuck, especially to just get started and don't worry about it and have a little bit of help. So that one was really helpful to me. Another one that has been really helpful.
Sorry, who's Writing Down the Bones by?
Sorry about that. Natalie Goldberg.
Okay, great. I'm going to put it in the comments. So I want to make sure if anybody wants to check it out that they can. Yeah, cool.
She's written several things, but this one is just one of those iconic gems, especially for people starting out and who don't know where to begin. Another one, and this one particularly helped me write the prologue of the book, but this is called Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear. And it's by Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and quite a number of other books that are pretty well known. But this is just about the creative process and how empowering it is and what a joy it can be, and how to do it for the sake of doing it, and not worrying about maybe where you're going with it, that everybody needs some creative outlet of some kind.
I'm glad you mentioned the prologue, because I loved it. I love that the intro had its own sort of vibrancy and life and metaphor. And I'd just like to, if you'll indulge me, read the first couple sentences, because I think that this is pretty fantastic and does tell you a lot about what the book itself is. It starts, "In your bones is a collection of poems that grew in the dark. They grew quietly over years out of places they were told not to grow, popping like mushrooms covered with layers of dark words intended to keep them down. They grew anyway. They are glimpses, real and imagined, that I try to capture in the light for a fleeting moment." And I just love that, because there's the metaphor of, you kind of get into this feeling of in your bones and burial and being in the dark and mushrooms and vegetation and regrowth and rebirth and coming back out of that dark into the light. And you also touch on moments that people shouldn't talk about, which addresses that shame that you mentioned as well. So I think you just kind of beautifully brings up a mood and a tone right off the bat that the rest of the book proceeds to kind of work around. And I was really blown away by that opening, which, sometimes prologues can just be basically the thesis statement for about 2 or 3 pages, but this was fantastic. It was very evocative. Was it written after the collection was already put together as a way to sort of tie it all together?
Yeah, that's a good question. If there was another prologue written that was more like you suggested, a lot of them are. And then I started reading Big Magic, and I was in a book study group reading it together with some other people. And in there are a few different exercises you can do. And one of them turned out to be me throwing out the prologue I had and starting that process. I think I told you the sharing of the book has been a really big, it's been a thing all of its own. But the prologue was kind of that first step to sharing it. And I realized how important that prologue was going to be to pulling it together as a collection and kind of framing where it was coming from. So I always say to people, please read the prologue, because if you don't, you're missing out on where this whole thing came from. And a lot of times with poetry, people want to just open it and, read a poem here and read a poem there. And you can certainly do that. But it's much more powerful, I think, in this particular one, if you start at the beginning with the prologue and you read it all the way through. You can do both, but at some point, if you haven't done that, I think it's helpful to do it that way.
Well, before we launch into reading a few of them, we should probably take a little plug to remind everybody, if you have any questions, do feel free to put them in the comments section. Looks like so far, Ed Parker has stated more people need to see this. So thank you, Ed. I think it's a pretty important conversation too. So thanks for watching and joining along. This is a collection called In Your Bones by Dena Parker Duke. And how can people get this if they want to purchase a copy?
It is available at Amazon. In fact, they had it on sale a little while ago. Don't know if it still is. If you are from Boise, or well, actually, you can probably access their website anywhere, but there is a bookstore here in Boise called the Rediscovered Bookshop that is carrying it as well. So it's a local bookshop. Yeah, so and on that website that I mentioned, tinylight.com, that's all one word, no caps or anything. There's a link there, and it talks a little bit more about the book, as well as a number of other things that are all the book inspired that website, but there's about 10 different pages on it, and a blog and some other things that are all kind of focused on this idea of the light that is inside of all of us that should be shared.
Excellent. Would you, at this point, I'd love it if you'd go ahead and kind of give us a couple of poems, and maybe we could talk through them a little bit and talk about your inspiration and the process with it.
Yeah, absolutely. One I like to share a lot is the second one in the collection, called The Drawer. And the inspiration behind this was really came from a neighborhood friend of ours that lived in the neighborhood, and it starts out kind of as his perspective on my family, and then it takes a more inside view. So, The Drawer. When I saw him last summer, he bragged about the snack drawer in our old house. He'd dreamt of it for years, full of ding-dongs and Twinkies in a bottom drawer. He longed to skip our halls barefoot and wake up to it in his pajamas. But our hallways were silent. No dreams of sweets. Smiles shut with the door. My drawer was a rug of grandma's twisted quilts that lay safely between the cushion of twin beds, where I could see the twinkle of lights that led outside. It was a bowl of sweet songs that echoed back while I floated in dreams that no one could take. So, as I said, thinking of somebody looking at my family and being jealous of our snack drawer. We did have a candy drawer, and all of us, all of the siblings in my family, love vegetables very much. And I don't know if we were just satiated with, we didn't need that much candy anymore.
Right.
But we did have bigger fish to fry as well, as they say. We were dealing with bigger things than what it looked like on the outside. And so many times, what people see just isn't always what it really is. So
I think that's definitely something that resonates and comes up in many stories when I'm speaking with folks who survived trauma, is that feeling that everyone, when they think of the cycle of abuse and particularly domestic violence, kind of goes to stereotypical imagery and goes to the idea of someone getting drunk after a football game and then beating up their wife, and it is so much bigger than that. It goes beyond just those gendered relationships, or beyond alcohol and drug use, beyond substance abuse, beyond any of that, into it can happen really to anyone. It can happen to sort of any family. And that idea in that particular poem, I really did resonate with that idea that everybody's house looks a little nicer from the other side, from next door. And I had a friend who was very much like that, who, in our case, it was a video game system, and we would also gather to play with that. He wasn't really as interested.
Right.
Could be there was other stuff going on. So it's really a fascinating look, and it feels very Midwestern too, with the with the sweets drawer.
Yeah, yeah. And it made me think, when I was looking at it through his eyes, it made me think, well, what would I find such joy in my home? What would be my drawer? Something that I would really long for and want. And that part of the poem actually became, I've shared that in a meditation circle before, as people just meditated on what might their drawer look like. And maybe it wouldn't be a drawer at all, but it would be a safe place. Because safe places, it's amazing how we can carve them out in some really difficult locations. And sometimes they're just a place inside of us.
Well, thank you for sharing. No, do you have one more that you'd be willing to kind of go through with us?
Yeah, I would like to share one that's called "It Is," because it really gives you the sense of where the title of the book came from, and was very much iconic to my experience, I guess. It's on page 20. Let's see. Okay. It is. You never said to keep it under the rug or radar, just between us, all in the family. But that's the way it is. That scent permeates the air with no words, involuntary movement, heartbeat, breath, a known fact, understood. The worst secrets are the ones you don't know you're keeping, that settle in your bones and seep into those hard white spaces that are alive with growing and breaking. Yeah, as I pulled these all together and was thinking about a title, I just, that image of how things, they talk about how your biography becomes your biology. That what you experience really goes deep and becomes part of who you are and part of your aches and pains and all kinds of things. I don't know. I've been a little obsessed with that image for a while now. Just at the miracle of how our bodies heal themselves, and scars and wounds and other things heal themselves. It's miraculous, but also how we go about taking things deep into ourselves, and it requires a pretty deep taking things out of ourselves as well to heal if there are things that are harming us.
You mentioned earlier that the importance of that, finding those moments of truth in poetry, and I love the analogy that even second grader poetry can be wonderful if it's got that truth to it. And I think that there's one of those key essential truths in this poem, and this was one of the poems that struck me as kind of the most powerfully directly about trauma and crisis, is this line: "The worst secrets are the ones you don't know you're keeping," and that just hit me full stop. I had to put the collection down for a second, just because it seemed like that was really such a powerful and simple truism, that to then tie it in with that kind of bone breaking and healing imagery. It was very resonant, and it was both very cathartic and very kind of painful to put that together. And it's, I think that is kind of in many ways the essence of that trauma, of keeping those secrets that you don't know you're keeping. It's just fantastically simple and moving. So
yeah,
I really enjoyed that poem. Yeah.
Thank you.
So what do you think next? Are the implication in the prologue is that maybe this is it for the moment on this particular subject, that you may move on to something else now. Do you have kind of any ideas of what the next steps for you are?
Yeah, I do. And I couldn't probably say that a few weeks ago. I've joined a new writing group and have just been writing some new poetry, and it seems really tied to the things that I've done on the website. There is more focus on more the light and shining a brighter light and the joy. So I'm really thinking about what really does come next after this. What does come after healing. Not that healing isn't a lifelong thing, because in a lot of ways it is, but I guess I want to be plugged more into the joy as I go forward, and that's what I'm going to do. Those are the poems that are coming out. I'm still surprising myself. I'm still having some that come out based on some pretty old moments. I had one recently about boundaries that surprised the heck out of me, where it came from. But yeah, so I'm thinking of the next poem, or the next book is going to be perhaps tiny lights, small poems about big moments.
I like it.
Yeah, we'll see.
So we're just a couple more questions. Again, I really want to touch back on this, because I think that your story is really inspirational to me as someone who works in this field and is also a creative person. And so I kind of want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to sort of help out folks who may be considering some sort of a creative outlet for healing. Is there any advice you would give? Say, if you were giving advice to yourself when you first started this process, any piece of advice to give to someone who's just kind of starting this out, and just sort of beginning this journey?
Well, I think that even though it sounds really cliche, following your gut is the single most important thing you'll ever do in life and in poetry, for sure. You can be in a writing group and people can have all kinds of opinions about your writing, but at the end of the day, you got to stand behind it. And so I think that all the way along, following your gut is, really important, creatively as well as when it comes to healing and everything else in life. So even though I know that's maybe not anything new, it's pretty big and deep to actually do it day by day, step by step, poem by poem. It's easy to get caught up in, I've gone to writing classes and had people hate my poetry and tear it apart. And I've had to pick myself back up and say, I can understand this piece, but no, we weren't on the same page, or whatever it might be. But following your gut is essential. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to let everybody know again, the collection is In Your Bones. It's available at Amazon and on atinylight.com. We also, and thank you for this, Dena was kind enough to present us with about 5 copies of In Your Bones. So if you are in the Lawrence area and you would like to read the collection, you can feel free to send me an email. I put my email address in the comments. I'll put it on the YouTube link, waverill@willowdvcenter.org, and we'll make sure that we get you a copy so that you can check it out. So thank you so much for those copies as well. I'm hoping folks will check out the collection, and I hope you'll come join us again for another Monday Meets when you have your next one ready.
I'd love to.
Any other people or pets or events upcoming that you want to plug before we head out? I'd like to give everybody a moment to just kind of plug what they're doing and what they're working on before we the thing.
Yeah, I think I kind of already did that through, I just sort of jumped in and did that with the website and talking about the new book, but it's pretty far from being ready to put together, but it'll be on my website when it's ready. So check that out. And
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate your taking the time to spend with us today, and thanks to everyone. Oh, looks like before we go, Susan Parker Lehrman says, "Thank you to my beautiful sister for sharing her story and for helping me get past the pain to the joy." So thank you to all of Dena's family and friends who were checking us out today. And we appreciate you. Please do come back and join us again. And everyone, please come get a copy of this. It is a really, really good collection. So thank you so much. And we'll catch you all next week. Thanks, Dena.
thanks, Will. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.